Good afternoon, everybody. Before we begin, I am going to hand over to our managing partner, James Libson, to say a few words by way of introduction. James?
Thank you, John, and welcome to our latest Dispute Nightmare session. I'm really delighted that so many of you could join, and with that, I will pass it back to John.
Thanks very much, James. That wasn't, in fact, our managing partner, James Libson. That was a deepfake based on a photograph. James, if you could please reveal yourself. Thanks very much. And as we've all seen in one form or another, deepfakes involve photos, videos, or audio clips that seem real, but are in fact generated by artificial intelligence. In research conducted by Deloitte last year, 26% of the executives surveyed said they'd experienced one or more deepfake incidents in the preceding 12 months alone. Deloitte's research division estimates that Gen AI could enable fraud losses to reach $40 billion by 2027 in the US, and that's up from $12.3 billion in 2023. With the spread of affordable Gen AI and machine learning tools and a massive investment into the development of new AI models, this is a clear and present danger for the business world. Business leaders were polled on what they saw as the biggest organizational risks from this threat, and they said loss of trust from business stakeholders in first place, including employees, investors, and vendors, compromised proprietary data, financial loss, and reputational damage. Last year, there were a number of high-profile and high-value examples of deepfake fraud, and these included a UK engineering company that had one of its Hong Kong employees duped into transferring 20 million into the hands of fraudsters. That employee was asked to join a video conference with several participants, not unlike this one. The other people on the call were all actually digital clone versions of senior officers of the company. This wasn't a cyber attack in the traditional sense, as none of the systems were compromised. It was actually a technology-enhanced social engineering, essentially using tech to circumvent the security barriers that businesses have put in place over many years of training, communications, and company policies. My name is John Sendama. I'm a disputes lawyer here at Mishcon de Reya, and I specialize in fraud investigations, data theft, and asset recovery. To help me explore the risks and practical tools to combat deepfake fraud, I'm joined this afternoon by my partner, Joe Hancock, who heads up our cyber risk and complex investigations practice. He leads a team of non-lawyer specialists working on cybersecurity, incident response, resilience, investigations, and asset tracing. I'm also joined by Paul Boskma of Mitek Systems. They specialize in cutting-edge software in the digital identity, fraud detection, and biometric authentication space. If you have any questions during the session, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll try our best to address them. If you've got any technical problems, please put those in the chat box. Starting off, Joe, this type of fraud is built on traditional social engineering. What are some of the red flags that people should look out for in real time? And in your view, do they differ at all in a deepfake fraud context?
Thanks, John. Good question. And I've always had a saying, I think, for the last 10 years, that everything we see to a certain degree is kind of like a new crime in an old way. As you said, these things deeply based in confidence tricks, in that you find them in the kind of, be it in the money laundering kind of traditional fraud world or in a kind of a new deepfake world. Ignoring for a minute kind of some of the kind of more kind of technical aspects of it, and the idea that we believe what's in front of us, you often see the usual kind of signs. Attackers looking to exploit hierarchy, so pretending to be someone more senior in an organization, instructing someone more junior. So there's a kind of positional hierarchy point there. Often where it tends to be in an organization, especially when it comes to making payments or to carrying actions, people naturally are used to being kind of instructed in that way, however you kind of put it. And that varies from culture to culture, depending on how that hierarchical power is kind of plays itself out. You'll also see the classic examples of urgency and then confidentiality. So confidentiality first, don't tell anyone about this. It's a very special project. Only you know about it. And that also has the benefit of the recipient then feeling like they're in a position of trust. They're brought into something, they're engaged. It also separates them from talking to other people who might say, really, are you sure the CFO wants you to pay £10 million over there? It keeps them away from that. And then the urgency, it's really critical. We've got to do this now. Trusting you to be able to do it. Don't tell anyone else. And you can see how this stuff starts to play out. And we've seen that without the deepfake component many times. We've seen it work via email. We've seen it work via kind of phone calls without voice cloning in the past. But now you have the added benefit of your eyes are seeing the person. You're perhaps getting messages that appear to be to them. You're hearing what potentially sounds to be like their kind of voice on the phone. But again, it's those old school classic confidence tricks. Make it urgent, make it secret, and exploit that kind of position where someone doesn't want to get into trouble. And ultimately, that's how the fraudsters will try and influence you to do something which, if you thought about it, you really wouldn't want to be doing.
And Paul, from a technical perspective, what's your view on the current state of deepfake technology that's being used in fraud, and how easy is it for people to detect this type of fraud in real time?
Yeah, I think we see definitely a trend at the moment that it's very easy to use software online, which you can find online, which is easy to consume, to create a deepfake and to use a deepfake, for example, in a video conference like this. And let's say 1 or 2 years ago, it was still very hard to find this technology. It was difficult to have the correct hardware to render on your laptop, for example, to do a real-time face morph where you're replacing one face with somebody else's face. But today it's easy accessible. There are online tools you can just buy for $10 per month. And it contains plugins where it's very easy to adopt in such a session like this, where you can replace the face with somebody else's face. And the problem with the current state of the deepfakes is that for a human being, it's almost impossible to detect whether you're talking with a real person, or, with your colleague, when we started the meeting with James, or it's somebody else. It's a face morph or a deepfake you're having a discussion with. And maybe my colleague John, who's also here in the call, can show us a little bit about how easy it is just to capture somebody's face. The only thing what we need is here, you just need a portrait image of somebody's face. Can be even a snipping tool and catching your face during a session like this. And in real time, you can replace the face with somebody else's face. So looking at these faces, you see that's impossible to tell whether it's a real person live talking with you or it's somebody else's face you're having a conversation with. Even when the sun is shining from the side window, it will have the glare on his face from the sun. And that's why I think technology needs to be used, needs to be embedded to make sure that you can detect deepfakes in such a session.
And moving on to a scenario in which the worst has happened, Joe, from your experience of incident response work, could you talk to us about the importance of first responders in an organization and what they would do in an incident such as this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. I mean, there's two kind of threads to it. There's kind of a cyber incident response angle to it, if you want to call it that, accepting that to a certain degree, all frauds are kind of digital frauds and all frauds are cyber frauds, but also there's kind of like a fraud incident response angle to it. And I'll defer to you to talk to some of the legal options because I just make an absolute hash of it. You really have, when it comes to kind of anything involving kind of financial fraud, like a golden 24 hours to really get on top of what has occurred. There's only so fast that funds can move through the fiat banking system. There is a wealth of evidence that needs kind of preserving. And if you take rapid and effective action in that first 24 hours, it puts you in the best place. Rapid because we've got a time limit, and effective because you need to do the right things. I say, preserve evidence, stop funds moving, come up with a good plan to deal with the incidents. That if you can achieve 2 out of those 3 things, you're in a good place. The cyber side of things is capturing that digital evidence. trying to work out what's occurred, making sure you're in the best position to investigate. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to capture all this evidence with a view to kind of like a criminal prosecution or those kind of things. It's just making sure that you're not losing anything as kind of time passes, as things age away. And then on the kind of finance side of things, it is acting really quickly. You know, again, if it is a traditional banking payment, making sure that you have dealt with your bank and the recipient bank, making sure that, you know, you've alerted them to the proceeds of crime emerging, and that you've engaged that kind of specialist advice. So yeah, in summary, those to me are the two kind of key things. 24 hours, you've got a fantastic chance then of recovery in action, and it's all about kind of preserving evidence and making sure you're rapid and effective. So I said two things, and there's three. Get an extra one.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I mean, from my perspective as an asset recovery specialist lawyer, you tend to see the types of teams that we deal with. First responder teams on the business side involve IT teams, legal teams, communication teams, and obviously the key senior decision makers. You know, you have the absolute gold standard in relation to those teams will be a situation in which those first responders have rehearsed their responses to cyber incidents, and obviously that's more powerful as a response than having a dusty policy sitting in a drawer somewhere with people's names on it. I think the key points are people need to know what their role in the response is, how to perform it. They also need to have some understanding of the tools that are available to the team and why the golden 24-hour period you mentioned is so critical. From my perspective, when I'm in hot pursuit of stolen funds, it's actually possible to get a very unhappy judge out of bed and get a court order over the phone to free stolen assets that have landed in a bank account belonging to fraudsters. And obviously, the quicker that's done, the more likely the money is still going to be there, because often we'll see funds hit the fraudster's first account and then very quickly after that be transferred to onward accounts, and often outside of the country. As you mentioned, Joe, there are a variety of legal tools that are available to deal with that type of fraud, whether that's worldwide freezing injunctions that will freeze assets in the bank account, or third-party disclosure orders, and that's orders against organizations like banks or internet service providers to force them to provide details such as account opening information, any kind of passports and address information, bank statements, those kinds of details that you know I'm able to feed into the work of investigators such as your team to be able to build out an asset recovery strategy and move quickly to recover any funds that have been paid out. Paul, just a quick question from your perspective. Obviously, running in parallel with any recovery steps that are being undertaken, what are your thoughts on the importance of preserving and collecting evidence in the event of an incident?
Yeah, I think from a technical perspective, it's very important that that you use a component which in real time can tell you when you have a conversation with somebody, is this a real person, yes or no? And so that means that you need to implement an AI model. And Mitek is a technology provider who can deliver these models as a plugin, for example, to a Zoom session like we are working with today. And within the session, in real time, we will analyze frames of the person you are having a conversation with and tell you in real time in the screen, is this a real person, yes or no? So, of course, this technology is supported by AI models we have built. And for us, it's important that we understand, okay, which frames did we collect? What were the scores for these frames? And if there's a scam you're involved in, make sure that we store this information and that we can prove that, hey, this is a deepfake, this was not a real image.
Thanks. And in terms of preventing this type of fraud happening, obviously, this can be catastrophic for a business for the reasons we've discussed previously. What steps, Joe, in your view, are the best way to mitigate against the risk of an attack like this happening in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, There's two sides to it, but one comment just to make first. I think that what's always really interesting about where this world is developing. We don't see deepfakes all the time at the moment. Okay, that this isn't something that's happening day in, day out. But it's as it gets easier to consume these services, the computing power required to make deepfakes gets less. We've seen how easy it is to do today, but as quality goes up, you're going to see more. I'm in a position now where, as an investigator, you used to be able to say, okay, if you've seen something, it is what it is. You really weren't in the worlds of kind of like things being faked. So two things, I think. First of all is there's a really boring answer to this, which is like, you just need to do the basics well. And that's been my experience across most things in cybersecurity and most things in fraud, is that, deep fake or not, if it is not possible for someone to make a payment from an organization's bank account without involving somebody else, you will always have two people involved. I've seen financial controls bypassed. I've seen, all sorts of things happen, but ultimately, you can engineer around some of this stuff. If you have a basic level of awareness of fraud, if you encourage people to speak up, that's very important. And again, these are the basics. Don't get wrong, they are hard with scale, complexity, and they're really hard when it comes to kind of, we incentivize people in their jobs to click links, open attachments, answer phone calls, make payments. And now we're going to say to people, hey, you need to be careful clicking links, opening attachments, believing what's in front of you. Is it really your kind of, your financial controller, whoever? So to me, one of the real key things, though, is having a kind of blame-free reporting mechanism. You need to have a mechanism by which people can say, both kind of like, centrally, report it to security at, is this real? I'm a bit suspicious about it. But also where people feel that there is permission to go to someone who may be in a more senior position, or perceived or not, in the hierarchy of the organization, say, maybe via a different channel, hey, can I just confirm this with you? And that at worst, they're going to feel themselves maybe a little bit silly when somebody says, yes, of course, it's me, what are you on about? But there will be no blame for that. And in the ideal world, they're held up as an exemplar of what you should do. You absolutely need that. The second point, though, to create that kind of suspicion is, you get these kind of feelings about things. It is a level of training and awareness. I think the days of like training everyone that all this bad stuff's out there is kind of behind us. We've all been on those courses where you click next repeatedly to get through your mandatory yearly bad stuff happens training. But so focusing training around this kind of issue on the teams that are really going to be impacted, which tends to be those that control finances, those that control kind of access or security, and those that are in kind of privileged positions. So, taking a risk-based approach to that training and providing real life examples and things that you hope will just get that kind of spidey sense tingling, and then that reporting mechanism by which someone could say, hang on a minute, that's a bit weird. I'll just go and ask John if John really meant to tell me to pay that X amount of money over there. But yeah, to me, it's kind of like I always bang on about this stuff. World-class, boring basics, and then a bit of awareness and a bit of reporting gets you a long way, I think.
And Paul, from your perspective, I know you mentioned earlier having real-time detection technology in place is going to be key. What is your view on the current adoption rates by businesses of this type of technology at the moment?
Yeah, I think in an online identity verification program where people are onboarding, for example, for opening up a new bank account, this technology is embedded, and we are real-time checking during such a process, is this a real person, or is this, for example, a deepfake who's trying to onboard for a new bank account? Although this technology is not really available or implemented yet for example, these Zoom calls. While the technology, it's the same, of course. It's the same camera which is being consumed. It's the same frames which are collected, and the models which can be used for detecting the deepfakes and to alert the user who's in this call. So watch out, maybe you're involved in something. You need to take a little bit more time before you start doing that payment. The technology is now available. So Mitek can deliver plugins for Zoom, for example, where you can do in real time deepfake detection based on what we do today.
Thanks. And just moving to some of the questions in our Q&A with our remaining time. One of the questions that's been asked is, can we give examples of what action should be taken within the first 24 hours Joe, would you be able to give a few thoughts on what specific steps should be taken in that golden 24-hour period?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just quickly, I mean, the thing I always say is you need to get a grip of the incident, which really means, you need to control the situation, not let it kind of control you. The first 24 hours tend to be a bit chaotic. What's happened, who's done it, where are things going? Sometimes people are a bit reticent to kind of to come forwards and kind of talk about what's happened. So getting good kind of information, building up a kind of a factual matrix of what's occurred. But I always say that one of the key things to do is that look for the kind of technical evidence that you're going to need to preserve. You don't need to go and look at it. So making sure, if there have been technical systems involved, be it email, be it your financial system, be it kind of communication systems, Teams, Zoom, just get hold of the technical data and hold it somewhere. And then also on the kind of financial side of things, always say kind of like overreact to kind of initial weak signals. There will be no harm in contacting your own bank and saying, hey, we think this is potentially fraudulent. You can undo that later. It's one of those things that it's not probably harmful to do today. There's some kind of like no regrets type actions. If you are in that first 24 hours working out what's gone on, stop overpayments. Don't let stuff kind of continue. It's unlikely to kill your business. You'll know if it's going to or not, on a kind of per payment basis. But yeah, so those to me are the kind of two key things which enable you to really get a grip of the situation.
Yeah, just building on what you said there, Joe. I think from my perspective, the critical one is unsurprisingly making sure that it's been reported to the business's bank. Because what will normally happen is they will send a message on the SWIFT system to the receiving bank that immediately says, this is a suspected fraud. Can you either recall those funds or freeze those funds in their account? And the quicker that happens, the more likely you are to be able to capture those funds still in the account. So I think that's one of the more critical ones in circumstances where there's been theft of funds. I think we've got time for one more question, and I think this is one for you, Paul. The plugins that you mentioned earlier, and I think these are the detection plugins. Do they work for voice notes and voicemails, or just for visual deepfakes? What is the current position on those?
Now, Mitek Systems delivers technology. We build technology. It's all our own proprietary technology. We build technology for deepfake detection. So these are models to tell you whether the image which you see in your screen is it a live person, or is that a rendered, is that a face morph or something else? But we can do the same for voice prints. So even with voice, when the quality of the voice channel is good enough, we can tell you whether it's a live voice or a recorded voice. And we can also combine this into one section for checking. So we can do and voice and face at the same moment, telling you, hey, you're dealing with a live person and it's his real voice.
Thanks. And there are a few other questions in the Q&A chat box, but we will pick these up offline as we are running out of time at the moment. Just to close out, if I could ask each of you for one key takeaway for the audience in relation to defending against this type of threat. Joe, if I could start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. My key takeaway is always that, every kind of minute you spend thinking about kind of this kind of stuff in advance of it becoming an incident is always going to be critical. So even if you just go away and think for 20 minutes over a coffee, where would we see a deepfake problem? Would we detect it? What would we do about it? That is going to be, you want 20 minutes kind of better planned than you would be. And that will pay off exponentially. If you can spend an hour on it, even better, 2 hours, even better than that. But everything you can kind of do in advance. Just thinking through these scenarios doesn't just improve outcomes for a deepfake type incident, but for all kind of frauds and cyber incidents overall.
And Paul?
Sorry. Yeah, I think. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, it's just one key takeaway for the audience.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. I was reading the chat. I think deepfakes is a kind of a technology a human being is not capable of detecting anymore. So you need to implement technology to support the user or the human to see whether it's a real or not real.
Thanks very much. So that's all we have time for. I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Joe, Paul, and the other John, or fake James Libson, for sharing their expertise in this discussion this afternoon. Thanks to all of the Mishcon team for their hard work in pulling this all together. And thank you to the audience for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, there'll be a recording available to everybody who signed up. And we'll also share our contact details for any more follow-up queries, and we'll be answering the questions that were dropped into the Q&A. So thank you very much.